Joining me today is our guy, Brian Geltzeiler, man, NBA analyst extraordinaire. You can catch him on SiriusXM NBA Radio on NBA Weekend with former Coach of the Year, Sam Mitchell, every Saturday from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Brian, welcome back, man. Good to have you back on, man.
Thank you, CP. Love being here with you.
Yes.
Always a lot of fun, my man.
Absolutely. And as we were just talking about, man, I mean, the time just flies by so quickly.
It does.
And here we are, just a couple of days away from the start of the season. Let's jump right into it. You and Sam were at Cavs training camp just yesterday.
Correct.
What do you think about the reigning Eastern Conference regular season champions, Kenny Atkinson, Coach of the Year? What were your key takeaways from Cavs camp?
The vibe is awesome there, like really awesome. Like the mix, CP, of working hard, having urgency, but being confident and enjoying the work. So think about all those four things together. First of all, like you can't fake the funk sometimes. These guys really like each other. Like there's and Darius Garland at some point when we were interviewing Sam and I said, he goes, Donovan and I butt heads all the time. He's like, but we're like brothers. We make up a half hour later. He's like, it's not always going to be perfect, but there's a love among these guys. They have an admiration for one another, and there's something to be said for some continuity, for keeping a team together, not shuffling the deck on every bad thing that happens. One of the things with the Cavaliers that was the common theme is they feel as though they beat the Pacers in that series if Darius Garland is a healthy player. And Darius Garland addressed some of this, both on air and off air with Sam and I, about some of the heat he took for the toe injury. And I think people like Darius Garland's toe injury was the same one that Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals has. Okay? Joe Burrow's out for like the season. With that, Garland shot it up and played. But it's not like you shoot up a calf or you shoot up a hamstring. Okay? You have to plant on that toe. And if you can't feel the toe and it's numb, it rolls up underneath you. You can't move. So they look at that last year and feel as though those outcomes would have been much different with a healthier version of Garland. Now, the scary part for them is they open the season, Garland's still not 100%.
Right.
Max Strus is not starting the season. I don't think DeAndre Hunter's going to start the season. So they're without some very key pieces to start here. So how they recover and what they do there, I think is going to be interesting. But I think also, and no one came out and said this, but the impression that Sam and I both got, especially from Kenny Atkinson, was that they're playing the long game here. The idea is to stretch this thing to be healthy for the playoffs. 64 wins is not another requirement for them. They obviously do want the 1 seed, but they're going to prioritize, doing the best they can to make sure that their core four, and they refer to it there as their core four, Mitchell, Garland, Mobley, and Allen, that their core four are all healthy and ready for the playoffs.
Well, I think a couple of things that was quite remarkable with their season last year, which led to Kenny Atkinson winning the Coach of the Year, was he seemed to want to lengthen the bench, limit minutes for his guys. They still ripped off 17 straight here, 16 straight there in the second half. So they still make their way to 64 wins as he's kind of pacing them. But then it all falls apart at the wrong time in the playoffs, where Garland has the toe. DeAndre Hunter was battling some injuries. Spider's always hobbling here and there. So it's just very interesting how things kind of crash for them at the wrong time, despite a great regular season.
No, Kenny addressed that with us too, and what he said was interesting is he'd do it the same way again. He doesn't think that was the wrong plan. He felt as though stretching their minutes was a good thing. The other thing that he really harped on was Donovan Mitchell's level of unselfishness. That Donovan Mitchell was extremely willing at this stage of his career to play less minutes, to take less shots, to score less points, and to make sure everybody else gets to eat. The one thing Atkins said, which is interesting, he's like, I had to remind Donovan at times, go be you. Like, you can there's times I'm going to want you to forget everybody else and go get a bucket because that's what you're best at. So that was a conversation. The other thing that was interesting is, Sam brought up the smallishness of the backcourt with Garland and Mitchell. And Kenny Atkinson said, listen, when people call Donovan Mitchell small, they're not thinking of it the right way. He's not small at all. And when we took a look at him, he's bulked up, but not in a bad way. Like, he looks a little bit like Derrick Henry of the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah.
Okay, he's like, he's only 6'3", Donovan, but he's got a barrel chest and physical as physical could be. So listen, the Cavs, They look really good. The vibe is right. They see an opportunity. They feel very similar to how the Knicks feel right now, which is this is a now or never year for us. We have a unique opportunity. You don't know what happens year over year. And for this group that's been together for 4 years, they like being together. And there's an understanding that if we don't get it done soon, like this year, we may not be together that much longer. But there is a bond among this team that Kenny Atkinson has fostered. And I'm not beating up on J.B. Bickerstaff, who did a great job before that and established defensive identity for that team that Atkinson has continued. And Atkinson was very clear about that, talking about what he's inherited here and leaned into and built off of. With all that said, you know, these shelf lives of having these title contention windows are not forever.
Yeah.
And so I think Cleveland's starting to feel a little bit of that pressure, but in a good way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, second apron team, and
the only one in the league.
Only one in the league, and that window is closing. And it's very interesting how the storylines changed last year as the season progressed, because it was Cleveland at the top of the East. They were the elite team. The Knicks could not beat them. They beat the Knicks in, I believe, 3 out of the 4 contests that they played. And then they get eliminated by the Pacers, and it's the Knicks that move on. Yes, they lose to the Pacers in the ECF, but they take over the offseason cycle, and now the new cycle, and now, as you said, a lot of the hype is on the Knicks. Are the Cavs feeling disrespected here? You know, how are they feeling as it relates to the standing against the Knicks?
You know, it was interesting. We asked that question, Sam and I, to a couple different people we interviewed. We asked it to Kenny Atkinson. He had a big smile on his face. He said, we're under the radar, which is exactly where we like it. You know, and so he said, we have no problem with that. Talk about the Knicks as much as you want. We're just going to win basketball games. Jared Allen had a different perspective, where he just said, listen, that's New York. He said, we're Cleveland, they're New York. Everybody's going to always talk about New York more, especially when they're good. And he said, we kind of don't care. That's not what we're about. The Cavs are okay right now, for lack of a better term, to just kind of hang back in anonymity. They don't want to talk. They want to play. They want to show their actions. They understand that last year's playoff result was a big disappointment in terms of the level of expectations that they established. But, and I think it's the most important thing with the Cavs, their confidence has not waned at all. If anything, they're more confident, because they kind of looked at what went wrong last year with Mitchell being banged up, Garland being hurt, Hunter being banged up, and saying, you know what? As a healthy team, we're better than everybody. And they think they can go win a championship. They think they can be better than the Thunder. And listen, if everything gets, all cylinders are firing in the right direction, that's entirely possible. But I'll tell you, if, you know, for your Knick fan listeners and viewers here, CP, got to be a little nervous about the Cavs. There's a lot of swagger there.
Well, you know someone who took that step when you mentioned confidence and taking a step up. Hey, Evan Mobley, man. Defensive player of the year. Went up a couple of notches in points per game. His three-point shooting was really good for the Cavs. Some argue that they went away from him a little bit in that Pacers series. What are you expecting from Mobley this year? Because I continue to think that he's the guy that turns things for them in a championship direction.
So this is interesting, because Kenny Atkinson told Sam and I straight out that the next, just in second-team All-NBA, he's been Defensive Player of the Year. The next step for Mobley is to be an MVP candidate. And we turn that, as us in the media tend to do sometimes, we turn that back on Evan when we sat down and interviewed him. And he said, listen, he said, I'd love to be an MVP candidate. He said, but it's all got to work within the framework of us winning a championship. He said, that's where this has to be. He said, yes, can I grow more as a player? He's like, absolutely. Do I want to grow more as a player? Absolutely. He's like, but I want to do it within the framework of this group that we have here. Mobley was very big to say, this is not a me thing. This is an us thing. And frankly, I love the answer.
Very selfless.
Super answer to the question, with the fact that you can make a big deal over my development, but I only want that big deal to be made if it's translating into making this team better. Not worrying about making me better. He's worrying about making the team better. And I think that's huge. He was somewhat matter of fact in saying that, you know, he feels pretty confident he can go back to being the Defensive Player of the Year. He thinks that that's an award that's out there for him this year. And again, I think for Mobley, you just made an excellent point about Mobley. It's less about what Evan does and more about the fact that they got to be careful not to lose him at times.
Yeah.
They forget he's on the floor. Listen, I like him what the Cavs do with Mobley to what the Knicks do with Karl Towns sometimes, where you have a guy that if you run things through him consistently, possession over possession, a lot of good things are going to happen because of how multi-talented he is, both inside and on the perimeter. But what happens is your games get a little guard-centric when you have ball-dominant guards, when you have the Mitchell and Garlands of the world, where you have the Jalen Brunsons of the world, and you lose your big guys a little bit. I think that's the one thing with the Cavs that they have to be very careful about. Forgetting about what Mobley can be, function on what he is and take advantage of that the best way and the most that you can, because I think that's going to be what makes this Cavs offense a lot more efficient and a lot more unstoppable.
As we swing it over to the Knicks, if they are to do this and win the East and get past where Tibbs left his mark, what would it be from Mike Brown that got them to that point?
All right, so I want to start, and I'm going to answer your question in a minute, CP, but I want to start with something because I know you have a big contingent of Knicks viewers and listeners here. I want to explain something because I'm watching media narratives, and it almost feels like not only from the media but from the team, there is this concerted effort in training camp to try to portray Mike Brown as the anti-Tom Thibodeau. All right? And it's driving me freaking crazy, and I'm going to tell you why it's driving me crazy. You can hold the opinion, as I hold, that Tom Thibodeau's firing was unjustified, unwarranted, should have never happened, and if he was coaching this team would be in great shape. You can hold that opinion. At the same time, it can also be true that you like the Mike Brown hire. You think he can do a very good job with this basketball team, and you think they can be wildly successful with him. You can believe both things, because I do believe both things. Listen, I would never have fired Tom. But I think Mike Brown has walked into a situation here where Mike has the potential to do something great with this group. I'm saying it right now, I'm picking the Knicks to go to the finals out of the East.
Let's go.
Because
let's go.
I think this is I like the five-man unit that they're going to start, whether it ends up being Robinson or Hart. I don't even think it matters that much. But I think they've built some depth here. Listen, if Tom Thibodeau had a guy like Yabusele, I could promise he'd play 20, 25 minutes a game.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, he is a wrecking ball, and he will be fantastic for them. I'm not so high on the Clarkson thing, but I think having a full year of Robinson, and even if the Knicks are going to play 8 with Yabusele, Robinson, and McBride coming off the bench with how wing heavy you are in the starting lineup, I think that's kind of enough. And so, to me, I love the way the roster looks. The one thing I'll caution against is this. And I don't criticize Tom Thibodeau much because I think he did a largely excellent job getting this team to where he got them last year. If I had one criticism of Tom, it would be sometimes of the underuse of Karl Towns. I mentioned it earlier when we were discussing Evan Mobley. I think that a lot more offense needs to run through Towns. This whole thing you're hearing from the Knicks about having to play faster does not address that. You're not getting Towns the ball more playing faster. So I do think some of that, they will play it faster at certain points in time. And I do think some of that, especially with the story being released last week by Shams Charania of ESPN, that Giannis prefers the Knicks. That shines a spotlight on Mikal Bridges because of the draft capital they gave up for him.
Yes, it does.
So when you talk about playing fast highlights one guy above everybody else in that starting five, and that's Mikal Bridges, who would push the ball up the floor, guy very good at filling lanes, finishes nicely in transition. So all those things kind of highlight Bridges. I think a lot of this playing fast stuff is going to be short-lived. And I do think you'll see a little bit more of a diversified half-court offense. Keep one thing in mind about the Knicks and their weaknesses, CP. We have an old adage in the NBA. You can hide one in the playoffs. You can't hide two.
Can't hide two.
And some of the Knicks' best moments in last year's playoffs, I want you to keep in mind, both in the Boston series and the Indiana series, were with one of Brunson and Towns on the bench. Okay? Because they needed more defense. And so when you start to play fast, that is great offensively, but it compromises your defense a little bit. It makes transition defense having to be more important. Your margins for error are less there. And again, putting Brunson and Towns in a lot of pick and rolls together is going to yield some results for these other teams. So I'm going to be very interested to see how Brown handles the pace thing and how he kind of juggles Robinson and Towns and how much he takes the ball out of Brunson's hands, which I do think needs to happen a little bit. A, to preserve Jalen as much as possible because I do think he wears down at times.
Yeah.
B, This is going to be a crazy thing to say. I'd actually like to see the Knicks use Brunson a little more like the Warriors use Curry. Run him off some more screens.
Yeah, people have said that. Sure.
I like that a lot, and it's not unprecedented because that's a lot of how Dallas used him when he played with Luka. So you'd like to see a little bit more of that as well. But I do think Mike Brown is going to make some of those changes in how the offense runs. I just don't think the playing fast thing is going to be a long-term solution.
Yeah, they may not have the personnel to do it, right?
Correct.
There's one thing you could look at the Kings and say, oh, man, they really upped it. But, yeah, they had a dynamo at the point guard spot.
Fast guard in the league, De'Aaron Fox, right?
Exactly. So maybe it'll be at a pace that matches what these guys are capable of doing. But, you mentioned a lot of things that I agree with wholeheartedly in that when you have to hide two of your best players on the defensive side, maybe it's an uptick in offense that takes them over the top because the reality is maybe they can't crack the top 5 or the top 8 in defense in the league. And so if they're in that 10 to 14 range, which can be acceptable if you can get timely stops, then on the other side, you got to make sure that your offense, when, regular season, at times it was okay, but especially in the postseason, you've got to make sure that you can put those numbers up, diversify your offense, and let the threes fly. And when you mentioned Towns, their best three-point shooter, they were 27th in the league in attempts. They've got to up that number. They definitely have to up that number, and it goes through him.
Well, there's too many good three-point shooters on this team to not take more threes. And so I think that has to happen. But, I think we have to be very careful. In this day and age, I think you get a lot of people leaning into quantity threes versus quality threes. And my point being is that I don't need the contested ones off the dribble.
Right.
The ball's got to move. And that's a little bit of a concern here with the Knicks. And I know it's heresy with Knicks fans to be even slightly critical of Jalen Brunson for everything he delivers and everything he brings in and the role he's played in transforming this team and this franchise, which has been unbelievable. So I say all that with the utmost respect for the player and the person that Jalen Brunson is. He's got to move the ball out of his hands a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because one of the things, if I'm Mike Brown, that my whole thing with Brunson, with the understanding that Brunson lost a head coach who would let him do whatever he wanted to when it came to the ball, and the lead assistant, Brunson's dad, who's been moved down the bench. And so he doesn't have the input that he once did. If I'm Mike Brown and his associate head coach, Chris Jen, who, by the way, is an excellent associate head coach and is going to add a ton to this team, especially offensively, my thing with Jalen will be, you want more space to operate, where you have to do a little less to get your looks, get it out of your hands faster and more often. And I mean, that has to be something because Anunoby's an excellent three-point shooter. Towns is an excellent three-point shooter. I think Bridges can be a better shooter than he was last year for them, and Bridges is certainly very good out of the corners. So there's a lot of guys that can shoot the basketball on this team. Jalen not holding it the period of time that he holds it, I think is going to work much better for this group. But listen, we also talked about this in the lens of the Cavs too. They got a core they love that is together. The consistency and the continuity of bringing the same core back, I think there's a lot of value in that, especially when you see how the Knicks played last year, what they did. I think these are guys that'll learn how to play a little bit better together. And you said it earlier, it's going to be more of an equal opportunity offense, and I think that's absolutely necessary for the Knicks.
Well, the playmaking responsibility is one, to me, that's going to be one of their biggest keys, one of their biggest things to watch. I thought they were exposed, especially in the playoffs, for not having that. To me, it puts more responsibility on a guy like Mikal Bridges, Karl Anthony Towns. Like, those guys are going to have to, shuffle or shoulder, rather, some of that playmaking burden, take that off of Brunson's hands. And also with the Brogdon retirement, with that second unit, I'm concerned, like, who's going to be the guy? As you said, Brown wants those drive and spray threes, drive and kicks. Clarkson's going to drive. He can get you those paint touches, but he's putting the ball up. McBride is an off-ball scorer. So to me, like, a guy like a Hart might have to take on some of that playmaking for the second unit, or maybe it's something where, the wings and the guards are more aggressive defensively, getting more takeaways to get them easier buckets in transition. They're going to have to figure out those ways to generate those easier buckets.
No doubt. And Clarkson, if when it comes to the Knicks, Clarkson scares the crap out of me. And okay, he does because like we're talking about all the ball movement issues. This dude's the antithesis of ball movement.
Yeah,
he gets it. It's going up. Like and the thing about Clarkson. And this is why the Brogdon thing, if it worked out, and he didn't look good. He wasn't healthy, and it wasn't going to be. And the writing was on the wall.
Yeah.
So, but when you look at the thing with Clarkson, is the luxury you want to have with a player like Jordan Clarkson is that if he's hot, great, give him the ball and keep him on the floor. If he's missing, we don't need to play him.
No.
And it was always that Jamal Crawford thing. He was that kind of player, but Clarkson's not as good as Jamal Crawford.
Yeah.
So, but that's the thing with Clarkson. You're gonna need, you'll know in the first 2 to 3 minutes he's on the floor. Are we playing him 22 minutes tonight, or are we playing him 6? Like that's kind of where it is with him, because if he doesn't heat up fast, he is going to hurt you more than he helps. Because the other thing is this. He's bad defensively, CP. I wouldn't let him guard my spot online at the bank. Okay, this guy, can't guard a crosswalk, this guy.
Sure.
So that's the other problem that you're going to have. And to be fair, Deuce McBride does defend. And he does guard people, and he'll guard up a little bit. He's not the best defender in the world, but you can never fault Deuce for not competing on the
He's a competitor. Yeah.
He competes every single possession, even at times when he's overmatched. He competes. So, listen, again, if you have 8 coming into this season, in terms of the other guys that you've looked at, I think there's something there with Huck Porty. I really do.
Yeah, me too.
I don't think there's much there with Tyler Kolek, but I again like Huck Porty a lot. I know they like Shamet a lot, and part of Brogdon, retiring is the ability to keep Shamet. I don't know that they're going to be able to keep Garrison Matthews. I would certainly like to see them do that. And Pacome Daddier can shoot the ball. And I don't know if he's going to be able to do anything defensively or off the dribble, but he can shoot the ball. So let's see kind of if they can piece together a 9th guy in this rotation from that group and see how all that plays out. Because I do think for Mike Brown here, especially early on, he's going to want to have 9 that he trusts and feels comfortable to play. And I think with Brogdon retiring right now, he's only got 8.
I put the Knicks and the Cavs in that upper tier, and then the best of the rest. When you look at Atlanta, their improvements, to me, one of the best off seasons this past off season. Orlando, they go all in on the Bane trade. Boston expected to take a gap year with Tatum out, but still going to compete under Missoula. Pacers same way without Halliburton. You have the Bucks. Who do you like in that pack of the rest there?
Oh, you left one out.
Detroit.
Who I like the most. That's the one.
Detroit.
Now, even with Ivy starting the season hurt here.
Yeah.
I love Detroit. First of all, I think Asar Thompson did not play a whole season. He had an issue with a blood clot and sat out a ton of the season last year. I think Asar Thompson, I may pick him for Defensive Player of the Year. Keep in mind, the single biggest reason outside of Cade Cunningham that Detroit stretched the Knicks to 6 in the first round was because of how Asar Thompson guarded Brunson. He was fantastic on him.
Yeah.
So Detroit is my favorite of that group just because I think, listen, I don't love what they did in the offseason.
Me neither.
And, Beasley's not, was not going to be there either way, but said goodbye to Schroeder and Hardaway. Duncan Robinson, to me, is a one-trick pony.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money for him. Karis LeVert he'll be okay offensively when he decides he wants to pass the ball, and defensively he's not really very good. But I'm also counting on Cunningham being a little bit better. Durham being a lot better. Thompson being there the whole time. Tobias Harris had a very good year under the radar for them last year. It's a good team. I like Detroit a lot. I'm high on Milwaukee, and a lot of people aren't. I'm high on Milwaukee. I don't think you're going to get a Giannis trade this season.
No.
This is the type of team, CP, that Doc excels with. I will hold to this. Doc's best coaching job in his career was the 18-19 Clippers, where his 2 best players were Danilo Gallinari and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Okay, they were an 8 seed in a very tough West and took the vaunted Warriors to 6 games in the first round. Doc squeezed every ounce of production. Montrezl Harrell, Patrick Beverley. It was just a mishmash of guys, and Doc got him playing right. This team outside of Giannis looks a little like a team like that. Gary Trent was great in the playoffs. Kevin Porter played very well in the playoffs. I'm a huge Cole Anthony guy. They love AJ Green, just signed him to an extension. Portis is an intangible guy that brings a lot, and I think can help them a ton. Turner's a much better fit for this group than Brook Lopez ever was going to be. It's an interesting team. Am I counting on a Kuzma bounce back? No.
Yeah, right,
but if somehow he does, that certainly helps and enhances this. I like Milwaukee a lot. I'm not as high on Orlando as others. That over-under number of 50.5 I thought was absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
And a couple of things with Orlando. First of all, Franz Wagner is going to shoot 29% from three. The ball can't be in his hands that much. And people go crazy for him because he is additive, and there's a good passer and a ball handler and guards and rebounds. He does a lot of different things out there. But the bottom line is you're paying this dude in excess of $35 million a year, and if he's going to shoot 29% from three, he's no number two option.
It's tough.
He isn't.
Right.
And Bane's, listen, Bane can shoot the ball, and they need somebody that can shoot the ball. Is he going to be everything that they need? And if I told you Orlando had a 45-win season and ended up in a 4-seed or a 5-seed in the East, would you think that was an underachievement? I wouldn't.
No.
But that's kind of where they're going to be. I like that team in that area. And then the other team that everybody's really high on, I'm just not as high on, is the Atlanta Hawks. You're right. They had a great offseason. They bring in Porzingis. They bring in Alexander Walker. Alexander Walker's additive and will help. You put him and Daniels in the backcourt together at times. You'll be very tough defensively.
Yeah.
But here's my thing with the Hawks and why I went under on them, and I'm not gaga for them. How often does Porzingis stay healthy?
That's true. That is true.
And you need that. Like the whole reason everybody's excited about him is because of KP.
That's right.
And the whole playing KP and Jalen Johnson together and KP and Okongwu together. And that's the other thing. Love Jalen Johnson as a player. Can he stay on the floor?
Can he stay healthy?
Because he doesn't stay on the floor either.
True.
So so you have all these young guys that you think, Dyson Daniels is very good. I think this is a good group around Trey Young. But if you don't have Porzingis for 60 to 65 games, and you don't have Jalen Johnson for 60 to 65 games, this team's a playing team. So that's going to be the interesting thing for the Atlanta Hawks with me. The Celtics are going to take 63s a game. And some nights are going to look like world beaters, and some nights are going to look like the worst team you ever saw. And it'll probably amount to something in the 500 range. The one thing I'll say is don't sleep on the Pacers.
Yeah.
I spoke to somebody a couple weeks ago in that organization, and I'm picking Andrew Nembhard for most improved player. Told me that Nembhard in this offseason has embraced this I'm going to be the lead ball handler thing, and it's been awesome. And so I think that's an interesting thing to watch. Miles Turner was not good in the finals.
No, he was not.
So they like Isaiah Jackson. Wiseman looks better. They think Jay Huff can give him some minutes at that spot. And listen, I hear Obi Toppins had a great camp and worked hard all offseason. It looks better than he's ever looked. You're going to see a lot of playing fast with Siakam and Toppin at 4 and 5 for that team. More minutes for Matherin. It's an interesting group there. Again, do I think they're going to win 45 games? No. Could I see them at 41 and 41 or 43 and 39 in the East? I could.
Yeah, with Detroit, I'm not so sure, man. I think this is going to be a prove-it year for Detroit, especially for Jaden Ivey. The prove-it year in terms of do they have the capable second star to help Cade really move that thing forward. I'm not sure with Ivey. He's already a little bit of a setback with the knee procedure on the left knee, right? And last year was the right knee. So
right knee.
That's a little bit concerning. I think this is going to be a prove-it year to Detroit to see, okay, does Trajan Langdon need to go out there and make a trade? Do you need to, take a low-risk move on a Zion or something? I'm not so sure, but I wasn't impressed with Robinson, LeVert, because last year, that's a point. I mean, Malik Beasley had a ridiculous year last year. Yes, Schroeder coming in off the scrap heap, like those guys really.
And Hardaway was awesome.
And Hardaway. With Tobias, they really relied on their vets to have a magical season for them, but I don't see that same quality there with this team, so certainly could be wrong. With the Magic, I'm with you. I like the Bane acquisition. It certainly fills some of their need, but Paolo and Franz have not proven to be great three-point shooters. The shot selection can be a little bit dicey. One thing's for sure, with Mosley and Orlando, their defensive floor is going to be ridiculous. They're going to bruise you into submission to try to win a lot of games. I just don't know if their offense, which was 16th in the league last year, are they ready to take that next step to really be, like you said, northwards of 50-some-odd wins?
Right.
I'm not so sure. on the flip side, you could say, hey, they dealt with all the injuries to Powell and Franz last year,
and
Suggs. And
that's part of what makes me nervous about them. He is a vital player to what they do on both ends of the floor, but especially defensively. And without Suggs, it's a very, very different group. Yeah. And Suggs is another one. Young guy, not proven to be able to stay healthy in this league. So some of this stuff is, well, if with health, I think you kind of have to look at certain situations, like Philly, for example. How do you buy into Philly? If guys are always hurt, at some point in time when you are making predictions and looking at what teams are going to do this season, it's not unfair to assume that guys that are always hurt are going to be hurt.
Yeah, that's true. And that's what you're saying with the Hawks, because I see them as my sleeper team if they stay healthy. And Porzingis is a big part of that. Jalen Johnson, who, when healthy, I love his game, a double-double machine.
Fantastic. All-star player.
And they have the wing depth. When I look at teams like the Knicks or even like the Cavs, that can give you fits with Johnson, Reese, Dyson Daniels. Reese having a good year.
Absolutely. Alexander Walker is a good addition there. Yep.
Right? And then they add some firepower with Kennard and those guys. You have Okongwu. So I think the Hawks are in an interesting position, not only because they're well coached under Quinn Snyder and they're in a position to compete now, but also, hey, maybe they trade Trey Young, right? They're not expected to sign him to a contract extension. They got the #1 pick from the Pelicans for next year, thanks Joe Dumars for some wacky reason. So they're in an interesting spot. Atlanta, that's my sleeper team. Not necessarily to win the East, but to be up there, in that 3 to 5 range.
Right. And listen, I think that you make a credible case for Atlanta. I think you do. But the Trey Young thing is very interesting to watch.
Yeah,
because and you could see a scenario where Young starts out playing great. They've put a lot around them, and they put guys around him that complement him. So Young's in the best situation he's been in his career. But you could see a scenario where Young comes out like a house of fire, playing great basketball, and the Hawks are suffering injuries. And they're just kind of not winning, hovering at 500, a little below.
Yeah.
And Young starts clamoring for a contract extension. And they're kind of scratching their head going, well, this is great that he's playing this way. But if we're not going to have success with him playing this way, are we really going to turn around and throw in excess of $50 million at him?
Right.
And that's the other overhang with them, is what happens with Trey Young. And then if you do decide to trade him, keep one thing in mind. Trey Young is only on this team, CP, because when they went to shop him and DeJounte Murray, Murray's the one that drew interest out there, not Trey Young.
Yeah.
No one wanted him. So what happens here? It's almost a blessing for the Hawks if he does play well and they decide to move him, because maybe there becomes a market for him. There's not a huge market for him. And if you look around the league, outside of a team like Toronto or a team like Sacramento, who wants him? Who's going to really want to do that? I don't think anybody's going to.
Yeah. It's very interesting, man. Wednesday, October 22nd. But Gels, man, we'll pencil it here. We'll pin it here. Catch up later on in the season, man. But I'll be tapped in with you and Sam Mitchell every Saturday, NBA weekends on SiriusXM, NBA Radio, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Gels, outstanding work as usual, man. I definitely appreciate the time. We went a little overtime here, so definitely appreciate you, man.
Always my pleasure, CP. Let's do it again soon, pal.